Maria Santos wiped the sweat from her forehead as she scrubbed the marble floors of the Henderson mansion for the third time that week. Her knees ached from years of cleaning, but she couldn't afford to slow down. At 52, she had been working as a housekeeper for wealthy families in Beverly Hills for over 2 decades, moving from one employer to another whenever they decided they no longer needed her services. The morning sun streamed through the massive windows of the Henderson estate, casting long shadows across the pristine living room. Maria moved methodically, dusting each piece of expensive furniture with the same care she would give her own belongings, if she had any worth dusting. Her small apartment in East Los Angeles was furnished with second-hand items and hand-me-downs, a stark contrast to the luxury she cleaned every day. Mrs. Henderson emerged from her bedroom, phone pressed to her ear, discussing plans for an upcoming charity gala. Maria had overheard fragments of these conversations for weeks. The annual Children's Hospital fundraiser was apparently the social event of the season, where Beverly Hills elite gathered to write checks and pat themselves on the back for their generosity. "Maria, make sure you pay extra attention to the guest bathroom today," Mrs. Henderson called out without looking in her direction. "We're having some important people over for dinner tonight to discuss the gala arrangements." Maria nodded silently and continued her work. She had learned long ago that the best housekeepers were invisible, present but unnoticed, efficient but silent. It was a survival skill she had perfected over the years. As she polished the silver picture frames on the mantelpiece, Maria's thoughts drifted to her own son, Carlos. He would have been 32 now if he had lived. The car accident 15 years ago had taken him away when he was just 17, full of dreams and ambition. He had been working part-time at a grocery store while finishing high school, determined to go to college and become an engineer. The memory still brought tears to her eyes. Carlos had been her everything after his father left when he was 5 years old. She had worked multiple jobs to keep him fed, clothed, and in school. He was brilliant, always at the top of his class, despite the challenges they faced. The guidance counselor had said he had real potential, that with his grades he could get scholarships to good universities. But fate had other plans. A drunk driver had run a red light on a rainy Tuesday evening. Carlos was walking home from work when it happened. Maria received the call at the hotel where she was working her second job, cleaning rooms until midnight. The words the police officer spoke over the phone seemed impossible to understand at first. Then the world collapsed around her. After Carlos died, Maria threw herself into work even more. It was the only way she could cope with the crushing grief. She moved from job to job, sometimes working for families for years, sometimes only months. She had no family left in the United States. Her parents had passed away back in El Salvador, and she had no siblings. The loneliness was overwhelming at times, but Maria had learned to find small joys in her daily routine. She took pride in her work, even if others didn't notice. She found satisfaction in making things clean and organized, in bringing order to chaos. It was a simple purpose, but it was hers. Mrs. Henderson's voice broke through her thoughts. "Oh, and Maria, I won't need you this Saturday evening. We'll all be at the Children's Hospital Gala. You can take the evening off." Maria smiled politely and thanked her employer. She had never attended such an event, of course. Her Saturday evenings were usually spent doing laundry, grocery shopping, or watching old movies on her small television. The idea of dressing up and attending a fancy party seemed as foreign to her as flying to the moon. But as the week progressed, something unexpected happened. Maria found herself thinking about the gala more and more. She had been cleaning Mrs. Henderson's home for 8 months now, and during that time she had heard countless conversations about the Children's Hospital. The stories touched her heart deeply. The hospital served children from all backgrounds, including many from low-income families like hers had been. She thought about Carlos and how they had struggled to afford his medical care when he was younger. There had been times when he was sick, and she had to choose between taking him to the doctor and paying rent. Thankfully, he had always recovered, but the stress and worry had been constant companions during those years. One afternoon, while organizing Mrs. Henderson's study, Maria noticed a pile of gala invitations on the desk. They were elegant, printed on thick cream-colored paper with gold lettering. She picked one up carefully, admiring the beautiful calligraphy. The ticket price was listed at the bottom, $500 per person. $500. That was more than Maria made in 2 weeks. It was her entire month's rent. The amount seemed astronomical for a single evening, even for charity. But as she held the invitation, she felt a strange pull, an inexplicable desire to be part of something larger than her daily routine of cleaning and solitude. That night, Maria sat in her small apartment, staring at her savings account statement. She had been putting away small amounts for years, originally hoping to visit Carlos's grave more often or maybe take a short vacation someday. The balance showed $847.32. It wasn't much, but it was everything she had managed to save. The idea that formed in her mind was crazy, she knew that. But something about the children's hospital gala called to her. Maybe it was the thought of honoring Carlos's memory by helping other children. Maybe it was the desire to do something completely different, to step outside her invisible existence for one evening. She pulled out her laptop, a gift from a former employer, and looked up the hospital's website. The stories and photos of the children they helped brought tears to her eyes. There was 7-year-old Isabella, who needed heart surgery, 10-year-old who was battling leukemia, 15-year-old Emma, who had been in a car accident similar to Carlos's but had survived and was learning to walk again. These children needed help, and people with money were gathering to provide it. Maria might not have much, but she had something. The question was whether she had the courage to use it. Over the next few days, the idea consumed her thoughts. She researched the gala online, reading about previous year's events. She saw photos of elegantly dressed people smiling and holding oversized checks. She read about the millions of dollars raised each year and the lives saved because of the generosity of attendees. But she also saw the divide between her world and theirs. These were people who owned multiple homes, drove cars that cost more than most people's annual salaries, and wore jewelry worth more than Maria would make in a lifetime. What would someone like her be doing at such an event? The doubt crept in every time she thought about actually attending. She had nothing appropriate to wear. She didn't know how to navigate such social situations. She would be completely out of place, a maid pretending to be something she wasn't. But then she would think about Carlos again, about his dreams and his kindness. He had always believed that people should help each other, regardless of their circumstances. He had volunteered at a local food bank when he was in high school, despite their own financial struggles. "Mom," he used to say, "it's not about how much you have, it's about what you're willing to give." Friday evening arrived, and Maria found herself standing in front of the small mirror in her bedroom, trying to imagine what it would be like to attend the gala. She had made her decision, but she hadn't acted on it yet. There was still time to change her mind, to return to her normal Saturday routine of solitude and quiet reflection. She thought about Mrs. Henderson and the other wealthy families she had worked for over the years. They weren't bad people, most of them. They were just living in a different world, one where charity galas were social obligations and $500 was pocket change. They probably never thought about the people who cleaned their homes having feelings, dreams, or losses of their own. But Maria did have feelings and dreams and losses. She had loved deeply and lost everything. She had worked hard and remained invisible. She had saved carefully and lived modestly. And now, for the first time in 15 years, she felt called to do something that scared her, something that might matter. The decision crystallized as she looked at Carlos's photo on her nightstand. He was smiling his beautiful smile, wearing his graduation cap from 8th grade. He had been so proud that day, so full of hope for the future. If he were here now, what would he tell her to do? Maria knew the answer. Carlos would tell her to be brave. He would tell her that helping children in need was worth any discomfort she might feel. He would remind her that everyone, regardless of their background, had something valuable to contribute. With trembling hands, Maria reached for her phone and dialed the number on the hospital's website. Her heart pounded as she waited for someone to answer. "Children's Hospital Foundation, this is Sarah speaking." "Hello," Maria said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I would like to purchase a ticket for tomorrow night's gala." There was a pause on the other end. "Of course, I'm so glad you called. May I have your name, please?" "Maria Santos." "And will this be for one ticket, Ms. Santos?" "Yes, just one." "Wonderful. The cost is $500, and that includes dinner and access to all the evening's festivities. We can process payment over the phone if you'd like." Maria's hand shook as she gave her credit card information. It was the most money she had ever spent on anything other than rent and basic necessities. As she hung up the phone, she felt a mixture of terror and excitement unlike anything she had experienced in years. She had done it. Tomorrow night, she would attend the Children's Hospital Charity Gala. She would sit among Beverly Hills elite, even though she had nothing in common with them except a desire to help children in need. She would honor Carlos's memory by doing something brave and generous. Saturday morning arrived with a mix of anxiety and anticipation that Maria had never experienced before. She woke up at dawn, as was her habit, but instead of her usual weekend routine of household chores and grocery shopping, she faced the daunting task of preparing for an evening among Lowe's Angel's social elite. Her first stop was the local thrift store in East LA, where she had bought most of her clothes over the years. The elderly woman who ran the store greeted her with a warm smile. "Maria, you're here early today, looking for anything special?" Maria felt embarrassed explaining her situation, but had known her for years and had always been kind. "I need something nice to wear to a charity event tonight, something formal." His eyebrows raised in surprise, but her expression remained supportive. "Well, let's see what we can find. You know, I got some beautiful donations this week from Beverly Hills. Follow me." They searched through racks of clothing together and pulled out several dresses. Most were too large or too small, but then found a navy blue dress with small silver beads around the neckline. It was simple but elegant, and when Maria tried it on, it fit perfectly. "This is beautiful," Maria said, looking at herself in the small mirror. She had never worn anything so nice. "You look lovely," said, refusing to let Maria pay full price. "Consider it a gift for whatever good you're planning to do tonight." Next, Maria went to a discount shoe store where she found a pair of black flats that matched the dress. They weren't fancy, but they were comfortable and looked appropriate. At the drugstore, she bought some basic makeup and spent time watching YouTube videos on her phone, learning how to apply it properly. As the afternoon approached, Maria's nervousness grew. She had never attended any formal event, let alone one where she didn't belong. The more she thought about it, the more convinced she became that she was making a terrible mistake. Her neighbor, Mrs., knocked on her door around 4 o'clock. The older woman had been like a mother to her since Carlos died, always checking on her and making sure she ate properly. "Maria, you look beautiful. Where are you going dressed so nicely?" Maria explained about the gala, and Mrs.'s face lit up with pride and concern. "You're very brave, but remember, you belong wherever your heart tells you to go. Carlos would be so proud of you for doing something to help other children." Those words gave Maria the courage she needed to continue getting ready. She styled her hair simply, applied her makeup carefully, and put on the navy dress. When she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. The taxi ride to the Beverly Hills Hotel, where the gala was being held, felt like traveling to another planet. Maria watched the neighborhoods change from her modest area to increasingly upscale communities. Palm trees lined perfectly manicured streets, and massive houses sat behind tall gates. When the taxi pulled up to the hotel, Maria's breath caught in her throat. The entrance was illuminated with thousands of lights, and elegantly dressed people were walking up red-carpeted steps. Valets were parking luxury cars that cost more than Maria would make in several lifetimes. "This is it, lady," the taxi driver said. "You sure this is the right place?" Maria paid him with shaking hands and stepped out of the car. For a moment, she considered getting back in and going home. She felt completely out of place, like an actress who had wandered onto the wrong movie set. But then she thought about the children at the hospital, about Carlos, about the $500 she had spent. She took a deep breath and walked toward the entrance. The ballroom was more magnificent than anything Maria had ever seen. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting sparkles across walls decorated with flowers and elegant draping. Round tables were set with fine china and silver, and servers in formal uniforms moved gracefully between guests carrying trays of appetizers. Maria stood near the entrance, watching the other attendees. The women wore designer gowns and jewelry that caught the light with every movement. The men were dressed in expensive suits and spoke confidently about business deals and vacation homes. Everyone seemed to know everyone else, greeting each other with air kisses and enthusiastic conversations about mutual friends. A young woman with a clipboard approached her. "Good evening. Welcome to our Children's Hospital Gala. May I have your name?" "Maria Santos," she replied quietly. The woman checked her list and smiled. "Perfect. Your table number is 37. The cocktail reception is for another hour, then we'll move to dinner. Please enjoy yourself." Maria found her assigned table and was relieved to see it was toward the back of the room. She sat down and watched the crowd, feeling invisible in a way that was both familiar and strange. At work, she was invisible because she was the help. Here, she was invisible because she simply didn't belong. The other people at her table began to arrive. There was Dr. Williams, a pediatric surgeon at the hospital, Robert and Jennifer, who owned several restaurants in the area, and Michael, a real estate developer with his wife Sarah. They all introduced themselves politely when they sat down, and Maria simply said she worked in domestic services. They seemed nice enough, but their conversation quickly turned to topics she couldn't contribute to: private schools for their children, recent trips to Europe, and upcoming renovations to their homes. Maria listened quietly, occasionally sipping the water that had been placed at each setting. She felt increasingly foolish for thinking she could fit in here, even for one evening. During the cocktail hour, she walked around the silent auction displays. There were vacation packages to exotic destinations, original artwork, jewelry, and experiences like private dinners with celebrity chefs. The bidding sheets showed amounts that made her head spin. People were casually writing down bids for thousands of dollars as if they were buying groceries. One auction item caught her attention: a week at a summer camp for underprivileged children. The current highest bid was $2,000. Maria thought about Carlos and how he had never had the opportunity to attend summer camp. They couldn't afford such luxuries when he was growing up. Without really thinking about it, Maria picked up the pen and wrote $2,100 on the bid sheet. It was money she didn't have, but something compelled her to try. As dinner was served, the hospital's chief of staff gave a presentation about their work. He showed slides of children who had been helped by the hospital's programs, and Maria found herself crying silently as she listened to their stories. There was 8-year-old David, who had been born with a severe heart defect. Without the hospital's intervention, he wouldn't have lived to see his first birthday. Now he was healthy and playing soccer with his friends. There was 12-year-old Sophia, who had been diagnosed with a rare form of cancer. The experimental treatment she received at the hospital had saved her life, and she was now in remission. Each story reminded Maria of why she was there. These children deserved every chance at life and happiness. If her small contribution could help even one child, then stepping out of her comfort zone was worth it. During the fundraising portion of the evening, people began pledging donations. The amounts were staggering: $10,000, $25,000, $50,000. $1 couple pledged $100,000, and the room erupted in applause. Maria felt embarrassed about her modest contribution, but she remembered what Carlos used to say about giving from the heart rather than the wallet. She had given more than she could afford because it felt right, not because she wanted recognition. As the evening progressed, she began to relax slightly. The people at her table, while living very different lives, were genuinely committed to helping the hospital. Dr. Williams shared stories about her young patients that brought tears to everyone's eyes. They talked about their own children and how grateful they were for good health. When the auction results were announced, Maria was shocked to learn she had won the summer camp package. $2,100 was now committed from her savings account, money she definitely didn't have. But somehow she felt good about it. She would figure out how to pay for it later. After dinner, there was dancing and more mingling. Maria found herself talking with Dr. Williams about the children at the hospital. The doctor was impressed by Maria's genuine interest and knowledge about the challenges faced by families with sick children. "Have you worked in healthcare?" Dr. Williams asked. "No, but I've experienced what it's like to struggle with medical expenses for a child. I understand how scary and overwhelming it can be for families." Dr. Williams nodded thoughtfully. "We need more people who understand that perspective on our volunteer committees. Would you be interested in getting involved?" The question surprised Maria. She had never considered herself qualified to volunteer for anything important. But the doctor seemed sincere, and Maria found herself saying yes. As the evening began to wind down, Maria realized that despite her fears and discomfort, she was glad she had come. She had contributed to something meaningful, connected with people who shared her desire to help children, and discovered that she had more to offer than she had realized. The taxi ride home felt different from the journey there. Maria was exhausted but energized at the same time. She had spent more money than she should have, committed to volunteering for something she knew nothing about, and survived an evening in a world completely foreign to her own. But most importantly, she had honored Carlos's memory by helping other children. She had been brave when everything in her wanted to run away. She had found her voice, even in a room full of people who seemed to speak a different language. As she unlocked the door to her small apartment, Maria felt something she hadn't experienced in 15 years. Hope. Maybe there was more to her life than just cleaning other people's homes and grieving for her son. Maybe she had something valuable to contribute to the world after all. The following Monday morning, Maria returned to work at the Henderson mansion with a secret that felt like carrying sunshine in her pocket. She had spent Sunday researching the Children's Hospital volunteer program and learning about the summer camp she had somehow won at the auction. The camp provided a week of outdoor activities for children from low-income families, many of whom were recovering from serious illnesses or dealing with difficult family circumstances. Mrs. Henderson was in the kitchen when Maria arrived, discussing weekend events with her friend Carol over coffee. They barely acknowledged Maria's presence as she began her usual Monday routine of gathering the weekend's laundry and organizing the house after the weekend's entertaining. The gala was absolutely magnificent this year, Mrs. Henderson was saying. They raised over $2 million, though I have to say some of the people they're letting attend these days. The standards seem to be dropping. Maria's cheeks burned as she folded towels in the adjacent laundry room, wondering if somehow Mrs. Henderson had seen her there. But she quickly realized they couldn't have noticed her among the hundreds of attendees. "I know exactly what you mean," Carol replied. "These charity events are supposed to be about networking with the right people, not just anyone with $500 to spend." Maria bit her tongue and continued working, but their words stung. She thought about Dr. Williams, who had been so kind and encouraging. She thought about the summer camp and the children who would benefit from it. She reminded herself that she belonged there as much as anyone else who cared about helping children. Later that afternoon, Maria's phone rang while she was dusting the living room. It was Dr. Williams from the hospital. "Maria, I hope I'm not calling at a bad time. I wanted to follow up on our conversation Saturday night. Are you still interested in volunteering with us?" Maria stepped into the bathroom and closed the door, lowering her voice. "Yes, I am, but I should tell you I'm not sure I'm qualified for anything important." Dr. Williams laughed warmly. "Maria, your compassion and understanding of what families go through is exactly what we need. We have plenty of people who can write checks, but we need people who truly understand the human side of what we do. Would you be able to come in Thursday afternoon for a volunteer orientation?" Maria agreed, her heart racing with excitement and nervousness. After hanging up, she realized she would need to ask Mrs. Henderson for time off, something she rarely did. That evening, Maria called the hospital's financial office about the summer camp auction payment. She had been worrying about the $2,100 all weekend, wondering how she would manage such a large expense. The woman on the phone was understanding when Maria explained her situation. "We offer payment plans for auction winners," she said kindly. "You can spread it over 6 months if that would help." Maria felt relief wash over her. It would still be a stretch, but $350 per month was manageable if she cut back on other expenses. Thursday afternoon, Maria found herself walking into the Children's Hospital for her volunteer orientation. The building was bright and cheerful, with colorful murals on the walls and artwork clearly created by young patients. Despite the serious medical work happening there, the atmosphere felt hopeful and warm. The orientation group consisted of 12 people from various backgrounds. There was a retired teacher, a college student studying pre-med, a grandmother whose grandchild had been treated at the hospital, and several others who had been touched by the hospital's work in different ways. Dr. Williams introduced Maria to Sandra Martinez, the volunteer coordinator. "Maria attended our gala on Saturday and expressed interest in getting involved. I think she would be perfect for our family support program." Sandra explained that family support volunteers worked with parents and siblings of patients, helping them navigate the hospital system, providing emotional support, and sometimes just being a friendly face during difficult times. "Many of our volunteers are people who have been through similar experiences themselves," Sandra explained. "They understand what families are going through in ways that others might not." As Maria learned about the program, she realized this was exactly what she wanted to do. She remembered how isolated and scared she had felt during Carlos's few hospitalizations when he was younger, how the medical terminology and insurance forms had seemed overwhelming. The training would take place over 4 weeks, every Thursday afternoon. Maria would need to learn about hospital policies, patient confidentiality, and crisis support techniques. It felt daunting but also exciting. When Maria asked Mrs. Henderson for Thursday afternoons off, she was surprised by her employer's response. "I suppose that would be fine," Mrs. Henderson said with a slight frown. "Though I hope this isn't going to become a regular thing. What kind of volunteering are you doing?" "At Children's Hospital," Maria answered simply, "working with families." Mrs. Henderson's expression changed slightly. "Oh, well, I suppose that's admirable. Yes, Thursday afternoons should be fine." Over the next few weeks, Maria threw herself into the volunteer training with an enthusiasm that surprised everyone, including herself. She learned about child development, family dynamics during medical crises, and communication techniques for supporting people under stress. Her favorite part of the training was the hospital tour, where she met some of the children who were currently patients. Despite their illnesses, many of them were surprisingly upbeat and resilient. They reminded her so much of Carlos at that age, full of curiosity and hope even when facing challenges. One little girl named Emma, who was 7 years old and recovering from surgery to repair a heart defect, particularly captured Maria's attention. Emma's mother was a single parent who worked 2 jobs and looked exhausted from worry and the stress of sleeping in hospital chairs. During one of her training visits, Maria sat with while Emma was having tests done, shared her fears about the medical bills, about missing work, about being strong enough for her daughter when she felt like falling apart herself. "I don't know how people do this," said, tears in her eyes. "I feel like I'm failing her every day." Maria took his hand gently. "You're not failing her. You're here, you love her, and that's what matters most. The rest we figure out one day at a time." It was the first time Maria had offered support to another parent, and she was surprised by how natural it felt. All those years of her own struggles, of navigating systems designed for people with more resources and education, had given her insights that could actually help others. After composed herself, she looked at Maria with curiosity. "Do you have children?" Maria hesitated for a moment, then said quietly, "I had a son. He passed away 15 years ago when he was 17. His expression filled with understanding and sympathy. "I'm so sorry, that must have been." "It was the hardest thing I've ever been through," Maria said. "But it taught me things about strength and love that I never knew before, and now I want to use what I learned to help other families." As her training progressed, Maria found herself thinking less about her daily struggles and more about how she could make a difference in other people's lives. For the first time since Carlos died, she felt like she had a purpose beyond just surviving each day. The other volunteers accepted her warmly, despite their different backgrounds. The retired teacher lived in a beautiful house in Monaco and drove a Mercedes, but she treated Maria as an equal and often asked for her perspective on working with families from challenging circumstances. "You understand things the rest of us can only read about in textbooks," told her one day. "The hospital is lucky to have you." As Maria's final week of training approached, she reflected on how much her life had changed since that Saturday night at the gala. She was still the same person who cleaned houses for a living, still lived in the same small apartment, still missed Carlos every day. But she no longer felt invisible or worthless. Sandra Martinez pulled her aside after her last training session. "Maria, I want to talk to you about something special. We've been watching your progress, and we think you have real potential as a volunteer. But we also think you might be interested in a part-time paid position we have opening up." Maria's heart skipped. A paid position. "It's 20 hours a week as a family advocate. You would work directly with families who need extra support navigating our systems, understanding their options, and accessing resources. It doesn't pay a lot, but it comes with benefits, and it would allow you to make this work your primary focus rather than just volunteer hours." Maria stared at Sandra in disbelief. "But I don't have any formal training in social work or counseling." "Maria, you have something more valuable than formal training. You have lived experience, genuine empathy, and a natural ability to connect with people who are struggling. We can provide additional training for the technical aspects. What we can't teach is the heart you bring to this work. The position would pay $18 an hour for 20 hours a week. It wasn't enough to live on by itself, but combined with part-time housekeeping work, it would allow Maria to significantly reduce her cleaning schedule and focus on work that felt meaningful. That night, Maria sat in her apartment holding the job offer paperwork. 6 weeks ago, she had been just another invisible maid, working solely to pay rent and buy groceries. Now she was being offered a position where she could actually make a difference in children's lives. She looked at Carlos's photo and smiled. "I think this is what you would want me to do. I think this is how I can honor your memory while still living my own life." The next morning, Maria called Sandra Martinez and accepted the position. As she hung up 3 months into her new position as a family advocate at Children's Hospital, Maria had found a rhythm that brought her more satisfaction than she had ever imagined possible. She worked at the hospital Tuesday through Friday mornings and still cleaned houses 3 afternoons a week to supplement her income. The schedule was demanding, but every day felt meaningful in a way her old routine never had. Her small office was decorated with thank you cards from families she had helped, drawings from young patients, and a photo of Carlos that she had finally felt ready to share with her colleagues. She had become known throughout the hospital as someone who could connect with the most stressed and overwhelmed parents, particularly those who were struggling financially or navigating the healthcare system for the first time. On this particular Tuesday morning in late October, Maria was reviewing the files of new families she would be meeting that week when Sandra Martinez knocked on her office door. "Maria, I have someone special I'd like you to meet," Sandra said, stepping aside to reveal a tall, well-dressed man in his early 30s. "This is Alexander. He's here about making a significant donation to our family support programs." Alexander extended his hand with a warm smile. "Please call me Alex. I've heard wonderful things about the work you're doing here, Ms. Santos." Maria shook his hand, nodding his expensive suit and confident bearing. He had the polished appearance of the wealthy donors she occasionally encountered at the hospital, but there was something different about his demeanor, something more personal and less formal than she was used to. "It's nice to meet you, mister. Sandra mentioned you're interested in our family support programs." "Very much so. I'd love to hear about your work directly from you if you have time. I'm particularly interested in how you help families who might feel overwhelmed by the medical system." They sat in Maria's small office, and she explained her role: helping families understand their options, connecting them with resources, providing emotional support during difficult times, and advocating for their needs within the hospital system. "Many of the families I work with are in situations I understand personally," Maria said. "Single parents, people working multiple jobs, families where English isn't the first language. The medical system can feel impossible to navigate when you're already stressed about your child's health." Alex listened intently, asking thoughtful questions about specific challenges families faced and how the program addressed them. His interest seemed genuine rather than the polite attention she sometimes received from wealthy donors who were there more for social obligation than real engagement. "Can you tell me about a family you've helped recently?" Alex asked. "I'd love to understand the real impact of this work." Maria thought of the family she had been working with for the past month. "There's a family whose 8-year-old son needed emergency surgery after a playground accident. The father works construction and doesn't have health insurance. The mother cleans offices at night. They were terrified not just about their son's condition, but about how they would ever pay for his care." "How were you able to help them?" "First, I connected them with our financial assistance program and helped them fill out the paperwork. Then I worked with the billing department to set up a payment plan they could actually manage. But just as importantly, I was there to translate when they met with doctors, to explain procedures in terms they could understand, and to just listen when they needed to express their fears." Alex nodded thoughtfully. "And their son?" "He's recovering beautifully. The family still has financial challenges, but they're not drowning in debt, and they understand they have ongoing support here at the hospital." "That's exactly the kind of impact I want to support," Alex said. "I'd like to make a donation that could expand this program, maybe hire additional family advocates like yourself." They talked for another 20 minutes about the program's needs and goals. Alex asked about Maria's background, though she kept her answers general, mentioning that she had personal experience with healthcare challenges as a single mother. After Alex left, Sandra returned to Maria's office with a curious expression. "That was interesting," Sandra said. "Alex isn't just any donor. His family foundation is one of the largest supporters of children's healthcare in California. This could be huge for our program." "He seemed genuinely interested in the work, not just writing a check for tax purposes," Maria observed. "That's exactly what I was thinking. He's known for being very hands-on with his philanthropy. His foundation funded the new pediatric cancer wing at UCLA, and he visits regularly to meet with families there." Over the following weeks, Alex returned to the hospital several times, sometimes to meet with administrators about his donation, but often just to observe the family support program in action. Maria found herself looking forward to his visits. Unlike many donors who seem to view the hospital's work as an abstract concept, Alex appeared genuinely moved by the individual stories of the children and families. During one of his visits, Alex asked if he could shadow Maria for a morning to better understand her daily work. They spent time with the Johnson family, whose 12-year-old daughter was undergoing chemotherapy for leukemia. Mrs. Johnson was a teacher who had exhausted her sick leave staying with her daughter, and the family was struggling with both the emotional and financial stress of the situation. Alex observed quietly as Maria helped Mrs. Johnson understand the treatment schedule, connected her with a support group for parents of children with cancer, and worked with the social services team to arrange temporary financial assistance. After they left the Johnson family, Alex was unusually quiet. "Are you okay?" Maria asked as they walked through the hospital corridors. "I'm just amazed by what you do," Alex said. "The way you knew exactly what that family needed, how you made them feel heard and supported, it's incredible." "It's not incredible, it's just necessary," Maria replied. "When you've been in their shoes, you know what helps and what doesn't." Alex stopped walking and turned to face her. "You've been in their shoes." Maria hesitated. She had been careful not to share too much personal information with donors, but there was something about Alex's genuine concern that made her trust him. "I lost my son 15 years ago. He was 17. It wasn't from illness, it was a car accident, but I remember what it felt like to be completely overwhelmed by systems I didn't understand, to feel like no one saw me as a person, just as a problem to be processed." Alex's expression filled with empathy and something else Maria couldn't quite identify. "I'm so sorry for your loss. What was your son's name?" Carlos Santos." Alex was quiet for a long moment, and Maria noticed his hands trembling slightly. "Carlos Santos," he repeated softly. "Yes, he was. He was everything to me." Alex sat down heavily on a nearby bench, his face pale. "Ms. Santos, I need to tell you something, and I'm not sure how to say this." Maria felt a chill of concern. "What is it?" "My name isn't actually Alexander. I mean, it is now, but I was born Alex Santos. I was adopted when I was 5 years old by the family." Maria stared at him, confusion clouding her thoughts. "I don't understand." Alex took a shaky breath. 15 years ago, I hired a private investigator to find my birth mother. Her name was Maria Santos, and she had a son named Carlos who died in a car accident. The investigator told me she worked as a housekeeper in Beverly Hills and that approaching her might not be welcome since she had never looked for me. The world seemed to spin around Maria. She gripped the bench to steady herself. "What are you saying?" I think you're my mother." Maria's mind reeled. She thought back to when she was 17, to the baby she had given up for adoption because she had no way to care for him. She had been working in a factory, living in a single room, barely able to feed herself. The adoption agency had promised her the baby would go to a good family who could give him everything she couldn't. "I named you," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Your birth name was Santos." Alex nodded, tears in his own eyes. "Yes, the family changed it to Alexander, but I always remembered being called before the adoption." Maria stood up abruptly, needing to move to process what she was hearing. "You've been coming here to my work, knowing who I was." "No," Alex said quickly, standing to face her. "I had no idea you worked here. When I decided to donate to the hospital, I specifically requested to meet with family advocates because I wanted to understand how to help families like the one I remembered you being in. It was pure coincidence that you were the advocate I was assigned to meet." But when you learned my name, I suspected, but I wasn't sure. There could be other Maria Santos who had lost sons named Carlos. I needed to be certain before I said anything. I've been trying to work up the courage to ask you directly. Maria felt overwhelmed by emotions she couldn't name. Joy, shock, fear, confusion, and a deep ache that had nothing to do with grief and everything to do with lost time. "You're my son," she said softly, as if testing the words. "My baby boy who I held for 3 days before I gave him away." "You're my mother," Alex replied. "The mother I've been looking for my entire adult life." They stood there in the hospital corridor, two people who had been searching for each other without knowing it, who had found each other in the place where Maria had learned to heal by helping other families stay together. The hospital cafeteria felt like the strangest place in the world for a mother and son to meet for the first time in 27 years, but Maria and Alex sat across from each other, each afraid to speak first. Maria's coffee grew cold as she studied Alex's face, seeing glimpses of the baby she had held so briefly all those years ago. "I don't know where to start," Alex said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've imagined this conversation 1,000 times, but now that it's happening, I don't know what to say." "Tell me about your life," Maria said softly. "Tell me about the family who raised you." Alex smiled, and Maria saw something familiar in his expression that made her heart ache. "The family is wonderful. They couldn't have children of their own, and they gave me everything I could have dreamed of. Good schools, opportunities, love. They never hid the fact that I was adopted, and they always said that if I wanted to find my birth parents when I was older, they would support me." "Are they still alive?" "Yes, Dad retired last year from his law practice, and Mom volunteers at an art museum. They live in San Francisco now, but we talk every day. They're going to be so happy to know I found you." Maria felt a mixture of gratitude and loss. "I'm glad you had a good life. I'm glad they loved you the way you deserve to be loved." "They did, but I always wondered about you. The adoption agency gave me very little information, just that you were young and couldn't care for a baby. I used to imagine what you might be like, whether you thought about me, whether you regretted giving me up." "I thought about you every day," Maria said, tears flowing freely now. "Every single day for 32 years. I named you because it means gift from God. And even though I couldn't keep you, I knew you were the most precious thing I would ever create." Alex reached across the table and took her hand. "I need you to know that I never blamed you for giving me up. Even as a child, I understood that sometimes love means making impossible choices." "I was 17 and working in a factory for minimum wage," Maria said. "I lived in one room and could barely feed myself. When I found out I was pregnant, I knew I had two choices: try to raise you in poverty with no resources, or give you to a family who could give you the life I couldn't." "You made the right choice," Alex said firmly. "I had opportunities with the family that I never would have had otherwise. I went to, then, business school. I've been able to travel the world and build a foundation that helps children and families. None of that would have been possible if you hadn't made the hardest decision a mother can make." They talked for 2 hours, sharing pieces of their lives across the decades that had separated them. Alex told her about his childhood, his education, his work with the family foundation. Maria told him about Carlos, about her years of grief and struggle, about finding purpose again through her work at the hospital. "I can't believe Carlos was my brother," Alex said. "I always wondered if I had siblings." "You would have loved him," Maria said. "He was brilliant and kind, always thinking about how to help other people. He wanted to be an engineer so he could design bridges and buildings that would make people's lives better." "He sounds like he was an amazing person." "He was, and you know what's strange? In some ways you remind me of him, not just in looks but in your spirit. The way you care about helping others, the way you listen to people's stories. Carlos would have been so proud to call you his brother." As the afternoon wore on, they began to navigate the awkward territory of building a relationship as adults. Alex wanted to know everything about Maria's current life, her work, her hopes. Maria was overwhelmed by the reality of Alex's success and philanthropy, trying to reconcile the baby she had given up with this accomplished man sitting across from her. "I have to ask," Alex said carefully, "when you saw me that first day at the hospital, did you suspect anything?" "No," Maria said honestly. "You looked familiar in a way I couldn't place, but I never imagined. I mean, what were the chances? Los Angeles is a huge city, and you could have been anywhere in the world." The investigator I hired told me you worked in Beverly Hills as a housekeeper. I used to drive through those neighborhoods sometimes, wondering if I might see you walking down the street. I never imagined you had become a family advocate at a children's hospital. I never imagined the baby I gave up had grown up to become a philanthropist who supports the exact kind of work I'm doing now. They both recognized the profound irony of their reunion. Alex had spent years funding programs to help families stay together, while Maria had dedicated her life to supporting parents through their children's medical crises. They had been working toward the same goals from different directions, drawn together by values that had been shaped by their separation. "Can I ask you about the gala?" Alex said. "Sandra mentioned that you attended our fundraiser a few months ago. That's actually how I first learned about the family support program." Maria blushed. "I used my entire savings to buy a ticket. I had been cleaning Mrs. Henderson's house and listening to her talk about the gala for weeks. Something about it called to me, maybe because of Carlos, maybe because I wanted to do something meaningful for once in my life." "You spent your savings on a charity ticket." "And I won a summer camp package at the silent auction that I couldn't afford," Maria admitted. "I'm still paying it off, but children who couldn't otherwise afford it are going to camp because of that donation." Alex stared at her in amazement. "You gave everything you had to help children you'd never met." "It felt right. Carlos would have wanted me to help other kids, even if it meant sacrificing for myself." "Mom," Alex said, and both of them froze at the word. It was the first time he had called her that, and it hung in the air between them like a bridge neither was sure they could cross. "I'm sorry," Alex said quickly. "I know I don't have the right to call you that. You're not. I mean, you are, but—" "You can call me whatever feels right to you," Maria said, her voice shaking. "I gave up the right to be your mother a long time ago, but if you want to use that word, I would be honored." Over the following weeks, they began to carefully build a relationship. Alex invited Maria to dinner at quiet restaurants where they could talk without interruption. He showed her photos of his adoptive parents and his life, while she shared stories about Carlos and her journey from teenage mother to family advocate. Alex's adoptive parents, Robert and flew down from San Francisco to meet Maria. She had been terrified about the meeting, worried they might resent her intrusion into their family, but they embraced her with warmth and gratitude. "Thank you for giving us our son," said, holding Maria's hands tightly. "He has brought us more joy than we could have imagined." "And thank you for raising him to be the man he is," Maria replied. "You gave him everything I couldn't." The family welcomed Maria into their lives with an openness that amazed her. They invited her to family dinners, included her in holiday celebrations, and treated her not as an outsider who had disrupted their family, but as someone who had always belonged. Alex began accompanying Maria to some of her hospital visits, learning more about her work and the families she served. He was struck by how naturally she connected with people in crisis, how she could provide comfort and practical help simultaneously. "I want to do something," Alex told her one evening as they walked through the hospital corridors after visiting a family whose premature twin daughters were in the NICU. "I want to expand the family support program so that every family who needs an advocate has access to one." "That would be wonderful," Maria said, "but it would be expensive. You'd need to hire several full-time advocates and support staff." "I can afford it," Alex said simply. "And I can't think of a better way to honor both our stories. Your experience as a single mother who couldn't navigate the system alone, and my experience as someone who was given opportunities because of a family's generosity." 6 months after their reunion, the foundation announced a $5 million grant to establish the Carlos Santos Family Advocacy Center at Children's Hospital. The center would provide comprehensive support to families dealing with pediatric medical crises, offering everything from financial guidance to emotional support to practical assistance navigating complex medical systems. At the center's dedication ceremony, Maria stood next to Alex as he spoke to a room full of hospital staff, community leaders, and donor families. She thought about the journey that had brought them to this moment. Her teenage pregnancy and impossible decision, Alex's privileged upbringing and his search for his origins, her years of grief and struggle, his years of success and philanthropy, and their eventual convergence in a place dedicated to helping families stay together through their worst moments. This center is named for Carlos Santos, who died too young but whose mother has spent years ensuring that other families receive the support she wishes had been available to her, Alex said. It's also a testament to the power of second chances and the way love can transcend time and circumstances to bring people together when they need each other most. After the ceremony, Maria and Alex walked through the hospital together, visiting some of the families Maria had been working with. They stopped by the room of 8-year-old Emma, whose heart surgery had been successful and who was finally going home. "Ms. Maria," Emma called out when she saw them, "are you coming to say goodbye?" "I wouldn't miss it," Maria said, hugging the little girl carefully. "And I want you to meet my son, Alex." Emma looked between them with the frank curiosity of children. "You don't look very much alike." "We were apart for a long time," Maria explained, "but we found each other again. Like in the fairy tales, where families get reunited at the end." Alex smiled at the little girl. "Exactly like that." As they left Emma's room, Maria reflected on how much her life had changed since that night at the charity gala when she had spent her savings to help children she'd never met. She had thought she was honoring Carlos's memory and maybe finding some purpose beyond her daily survival. Instead, she had found her lost son, gained a family she never expected, and discovered a calling that used all her experiences, both painful and joyful, to help others. The invisible maid who had cleaned other people's houses for decades had become the center of a program that would help thousands of families for years to come. "Mom," Alex said as they walked toward the parking garage, the word now natural and easy between them, "I have something to tell you." "What is it?" "And Robert want to know if you'd like to spend Christmas with us this year, as a family." Maria stopped walking and turned to look at her son, this successful, generous man who had somehow found his way back to her despite all the years and circumstances that had kept them apart. For the first time since Carlos died, she had something to look forward to during the holidays. "I would love that," she said. "I would love that more than anything." As they walked to their cars, Maria thought about all the ways life could surprise you, how the smallest acts of courage could lead to the most unexpected blessings. She had attended a charity gala because she wanted to honor her dead son's memory, and instead she had found her living son, who had been searching for her just as desperately as she had been searching for meaning. Sometimes, Maria realized, the very thing you think you've lost forever is simply waiting for the right moment to come home. Neither of them could have imagined this moment, but as they looked at each other, both saw something familiar in the other's eyes, something that transcended the years and circumstances that had kept them apart. She felt something she hadn't experienced in 15 years, excitement about the future. Her life was finally beginning again. She hung up the navy dress carefully, knowing she would probably never have occasion to wear it again. But she would always remember this night as the evening she stopped being invisible to herself. But first, she had to figure out what to wear.